Feminist evolutionary biologists Scowity and Buschhaus highly base their arguments on the origins of rape on actual radical feminists such as Susan Brown Miller. These arguments most circle around aggressive copulation creating hostile environments for females, thereby forcing them to trade future sexual access with male protection. The theoretical weakness of this explanation is that it doesn't explain why males use sexual as opposed to non-sexual aggression. Feminist evolutionary biologist Sarah Mesnick developed a bodyguard hypothesis to address the aforementioned weakness, which goes something like all the rest, that is, male aggression is central to controlling female behavior. Entering into sexual coalitions with bodyguards reduces vulnerability to aggression from other males, thereby making protection an important element of females' mate selection. This phenomenon explains why most females choose large males. In the human species, females residing with males are less likely to be victims of stranger sexual coercion compared to those living alone. For a common ground to be found in discussions like this, which would be very important for society and science in general, the hostility, especially from feminists, need to be toned down if not abandoned completely. The proximate or immediate causes of behavior are the elements that operate throughout an individual's lifetime, including socio-cultural influences, personal experiences, brain functions, hormones, and genes. The ultimate explanations as to how a trait became part of a species answer why questions that surround the existence of proximate causes. The questions include why humans have the psychological equipment they have and why does the equipment interact with environmental stimuli to produce the outcomes that they do. Ultimate explanations explain proximate causation because mental functions that process experiences are an outcome of evolutionary selection. Thus, our evolutionary past directly affects an individual's actions as stimuli or past experiences would. The assumption or assertion that human males and females ought to have evolved in a similar psychological manner is theoretically impossible and practically been proven to be untrue. Feminists fiercely challenged evolutionary biologist Randy Thornhill and the anthropologist Craig Palmer's publication, A Natural History of Rape, Biological Bases of Sexual Coercion, which is kind of the genesis of the discussions surrounding the biological foundations of rape. The fierce fight against the publication by social scientists and feminists is based on the perceptions of male bias in science and the possible foreseen dangers by the groups surrounding the use of biology as a source of implementing repressive policies. The basis of the evolutionary perspective of rape is the fact that humans are not born as blank slates or psychosexually neutral as feminists would argue to be the foundation of men learning how to rape as part of maintaining male dominance in society. The nature-nurture dichotomy is rooted in the naive realism that what exists is divided up in the same way in which we organize our thoughts. Rape based on the parental investment theory could be an adaptation, implying that it has largely been favored by selection because of increased reproductive success for men, or other evolutionary dispositions that were adaptive during the ancestral era. The baseline in the evolutionary perspective being, rape is dependent on certain conditions that range from substantial to non-existent. The evolutionary perspective of rape challenges the feminist view based on the sex-power dynamics by suggesting that rape predates the emergence of our species, evidenced by the widespread nature of forced copulation in the animal kingdom. The evolutionary view of rape largely builds on Robert Trivers's parental investment theory, which suggests that rape arises from differences in the evolution of male and female sexuality. Apart from Thornhill and Palmer, Richard Hagen, the evolutionary biologists Richard Alexander and Catherine Noonan, and the anthropologist Donald Simons are highlighted as some of the first professionals to shed light on the biological basis of rape. The starting point is the parental investment theory, which explains why males in sexually reproducing species are less indiscriminate when it comes to choosing partners, with the opposite being true for females who tend to be quite choosy. In the case of mammals, of course where humans fall, females have to invest a large amount of resources, that is time and energy, to achieve reproductive success, whereas males simply reproduce by depositing sperm. Reproductive success for males is limited by the number of fertile females they can copulate with, while a female reproductive success is limited by time and energy. Males are therefore more eager to mate at any time with any female that looks fertile, while women are very selective in looking for mates who present greater likelihood of not only providing good genes but also parental care and the resources required to raise an offspring. The resultant conflict of interest between males and females often leads the males to use force or the threat of force to gain sexual access to females. Behavioral strategies that raise the fitness of an organism relative to peers spreads throughout the population and becomes an example of reproductive success. Evolutionary biologists argue that it is common for males to steal sex when the perceived risks are low, with these males passing more genes compared to their risk-averse counterparts. Sexually coercing females as a source of reproductive success for males is associated with the fact that the unwillingness is sometimes perceived to be an implication of a romantic relationship, thereby raising the probability of parental care. Explaining rape as an adaptation requires examining the biological mechanisms associated with rape. Simon's publication, The Evolution of Human Sexuality, suggests that rape is more a product of differences in male and female evolution as opposed to an adaptation. Particularly, the differences in sexual selection lead males to exhibiting greater desire for sex partner variety compared to women. Males are more eager to copulate, engage in impersonal sex that does not include emotions or connections, and less discriminatory when picking partners. Simons outlines these psychological differences as the basis for rape because they give males the taste for low-cost impersonal sex that can lead to sexual coercion when the perceived risk is low. Simons argues, quote, "Sex and power are not antithetic, human motives are complex, intertwined, and often conflicting. Surely no completed rape has ever occurred in which the rapist did not experience some sexual feeling, and very likely no rape has ever occurred in which this was the only feeling the rapist experienced." Other evolutionary biologists such as William and Lee Shields or Thornhill support the adaptive take of males engaging in sexual coercion where coercion is an evolved condition-dependent alternative in males' sexual behaviors. The Thornhill suggests that sexual coercion is mostly used by men who lack status and resources required to attract women. Evolutionarily speaking, sexually unpopular males are willing to take the risks associated with sexual coercion and enjoy greater reproductive success compared to those who do not take on the risks. The problem is, evidence suggests that sexually coercive males are more experienced, thereby implying that they're sexually popular. The Shields argue that all males would sexually coerce females if provided with the right conditions. This argument is based on the assertion that all males have the behavioral elements necessary for sexual coercion, that is, honest courtship, deceitful courtship, and forcible rape. The most successful men, in terms of copulation at least, change tactics depending on the context or conditions that factor in vulnerability, reproductive value, and the related costs. According to the Shields, ultimately men may rape because it increases their biological fitness and thus rape may serve, at least in part, a reproductive function, but in an immediate proximate sense it is as likely that they rape because they are angry or hostile, as the feminists suggest. Rarely do warmth and affection go hand in hand with violence, and as such, anger and hostility could be associated with sexual coercion. Shields' theory of sexual coercion accommodates feminist views in terms of the proximate causes. Feminists in their view is that all men are rapists or potential rapists, with there being a common reproductive function between rape and consensual sex. Reproductive function in the evolutionary account of rape does not imply that rapists seek to propagate their genes, but selection retains the characteristics associated with reproductive success. A male psyche being disposed to sexual coercion under optimal conditions resulting in reproductive success implies that the underlying genes are proliferated. The disposition being more typical in males doesn't account for men's motivation to rape. Sociologist Lee Ellis proposed synthesized theory of rape which suggests that sexual coercion is motivated by two unlearned drives, that is, the sex drive that is higher in males than in females, and a subsequent drive to possess and control resources valuable to survival and reproduction, such as sex partners. The drive to possess and control valuable resources motivating males to get sex implies that sexual coercion is motivated by lust, with aggression and dominance being the tactics but not the goals as is commonly presented by feminists. Males and females being sexually possessive hardly seems to be a motivation for acquiring sex.